You do not do, you do not do. Any more? Black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot, for 30 years poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew.
Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal.
And a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours bean green over blue, in waters off beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you. Ach do.
In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars. But the name of the town is common, my Polak friend.
Say there are a dozen or two, so I could never tell where you, but your foot, your root, I could never talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw.
It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ick. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene.
An engine, chuffing me off like a Jew. A Jew to Daku, Auschwitz, Belsen? I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew.
The snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna, are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck, and my Turok pack, I may well be a bit of a Jew.
I have always been scared of you. With your Luftwaffe, and your gobbly goo, and your neat mustache, and your Aryan eye, bright blue. Panzerman, oh you.
Not God, but a swastika. So black, no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist. The boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you.
You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you. A cleft in your chin, instead of your foot. But no less the devil for that. No, not. Any less the black man who
bit my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried you. At 20, I tried to die and get back to you. I thought even the bones would do.
But they pulled me out of the sack and stuck me together with glue. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you. A man in black with a Mein Kampf look.
And a love of the rack and the screw. I said, I do. So finally, Daddy, I'm through. The telephone, it's off at the root. The voices just can't worm through.
If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year. 7 years, if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now.
There's a stake in your fat black heart. And the villagers never liked you. They are stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, you bastard, I'm through. We are annotating the poem Daddy by Sylvia Plath. You do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. So the first 3 lines is a reference, which we'll see later on, to Nazism, which is what the majority of the poem is about. But it's kind of like a child when they're little, they buy big shoes so that they can grow into them, but at a certain point they grow out of them as well. And so it's saying how the people have grown out of Nazism and what it did for their country. Also 30 years is mentioned, which is the beginning of the idea of time, which is seen throughout, and a more definitive timeline emerges throughout the poem. However, this is the beginning of the mention of it. And so then the next stanza is, Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal. So the daddy in the first line of this stanza refers back to you of the first line of the whole poem, because it's like more of a, it switches between speaking directly to daddy, and then speaking in the third person about daddy instead of the second person. And then we also interpreted daddy to be Hitler, since he was the father figure of Nazism, and he is the father to the speaker. And then continuing on, it's talking about how the speaker at this point in the poem wants to kill the dad. However, that we see the abrupt change later on in the poem. So this is the speaker looking back on his situation, on his life at this point. And then he wants to kill daddy at this point. However, the U.S. stopped Nazism before the speaker could revolt against Nazism and kill it himself. And so the big Frisco seal is a mention of San Francisco, California, which is a major part of America, major city in America.
Okay, so for these stanzas, it starts with, and ahead in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours being green over blue, in the waters off beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you. So in the freakish Atlantic, being green over blue, we thought that was a symbol of Lady Liberty and of freedom. And then in the waters of beautiful Nauset, that's in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So it goes back to earlier when he said Frisco, she said Frisco, the author is making references to places in America. And then I used to pray to recover you. So we thought the author wanted to revive Nazism, but this, like, the used to is the representation that they used to want to do that, but now they don't anymore. Ach du says, like, is a disbelief of how could I ever believe that I would want to recover you. So the next stanza starts, in the German tongue in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars, wars, wars. But the name of the town is common, my Polak friend. So we thought that this town was beat up by World War II. Like, the war just came and took it over. They didn't really give them much of an option. And their town is common. It's just like another town that was taken over by Nazism. And then the next stanza is, says there are a dozen or two, so I could never tell where you put your foot, your root. I could never talk to you. The tongue is stuck in my jaw. So there are a dozen two towns like that. It's normal. And then put your foot down, your root. He was always an outcast. He was never accepted. Like, it could never talk about it. It just thought that was how they were supposed to be, but she didn't really accept it. So, yeah.
It's stuck in a barbed wire snare, ick, ick, ick. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. So in this section, he stereotypes all Germans to be Nazi, like, supporters, whereas a lot of people were forced to follow Nazism. A lot of Germans who did it because it was a brutal regime. However, this speaker being on the outside just kind of assumes everybody is a Nazi supporter and a supporter of Hitler. And then the language being obscene shows that they didn't, when they came and took over this Polish town or wherever the speaker is from, they never, like, assimilated them into the culture. They just ran over them and kind of just made their language the one that was spoken, and never accepted the taken over people into their culture and their way of life. An engine chuffing me off like a Jew to Daku, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. So the engine speaks of the mechanical way that the killing of the Jews was done, and how there wasn't a lot of emotions and there wasn't a lot of humanity in it. And the speaker compares themselves to a Jew because they don't feel like they are accepted into society, and Jews were the Nazis tried to remove Jews from society. And then the whole section where it's talking about beginning to talk like a Jew and thinks that they might be a Jew, this speaks again to the never being fully accepted. And then the last stanza, the snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my Tarek pack, I may be a bit of a Jew. So in the first two lines, he realizes that Germany is not all that it's cracked up to be. That the outside world sees a very different view of Germany than he does, and it's not as pure. And then the last three lines kind of speaks to the speaker's ancestry and family and how they had their own culture, their own belief system, and just kind of like quirks about them, which is similar to the Jews in Germany, because they had their own ancestry and things like that.
I have always been scared of you, with your left off your gobbly goo, and your neat mustache, and your Aryan eye bright blue. Panzerman, oh you. So this stanza, the word you is italicized. We underlined it for emphasis because it goes back to the very beginning when they first talk about you referring to Daddy. And then we thought that the next three lines were describing Hitler and describing how he looks. And then Panzerman, oh you, are people who have control. So they're referring, because they drive the tanks, that's what a Panzerman is. So they are, they have control over things and they can destroy things and take over. So they're referring, how Nazism has taken over them, look what you did to me. So the next stanza starts, not God but a swastika, so black no sky could speak through. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. So not God but a swastika, they compare God to a swastika, so they put Nazism over religion and idolized it so much that that was their whole life. And then so black no sky could speak through. Everything was so uniform, that everything was so particular in a certain way that nothing could change, everything had to be a certain way. And then the next three lines, it then talking about every woman adores a fascist, because they made it seem attractive and made Nazism and fascism seem and being people who are brute seeming like something that's attractive, and that's how they portrayed it, but it wasn't. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you, a cleft in your chin instead of your foot, but no less the devil for that, no not, any less the black man who. So you stand at the blackboard, Daddy, you have to learn Nazism, you have to be taught it. It's not something you just figure out, you're thrown into it and you have to be taught it. And then the part about descriptions, it's because in Nazism the way you look mattered a lot. So the fact that they have a cleft in their chin makes them look bad, or any less the black man who, their appearance mattered so much compared to other things about them, and Nazism put a lot of focus on appearance.
Bit my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried you. At 20, I tried to die and get back to you. I thought even the bones would do. So this stanza explains more of the timeline that she's talking about in the very beginning with the 30 years. So when she's 10, which is the first mile marker or so, they buried you. In this case is Hitler. So this is when the face of Nazism died. However, Nazism itself did not actually die at this point. And then at 20, I tried to die. And so this is the second mile marker, and this is her suicide attempt. We believe it means her desperation for keeping Nazism alive and well, because she's now bought into the idea. She's grown up with it. It's been kind of force-fed to her to the point where she is willing to die for it, even though she doesn't actually believe it. And then the next stanza is, but they pulled me out of the sack and they stuck me together with glue, and I knew what to do. I made a model of you, a man in black with the mind-kept look. So the first two lines is talking about the doctors putting the speaker who was on the verge of dying because of the suicide attempt back together with their medicine, which is kind of like a Humpty Dumpty situation. And then the next three lines, she's still illusioned even after her suicide attempt
to get back to Nazism and just kind of really live it and love it. And then the last stanza in this section is, and a love of the rack and the screw, and I said, I do, so daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root, and the voices just can't worm through. So when she says, I do, this is this is like what someone says at a wedding, and so we believed it to mean that she was marrying the idea of Nazism. She was devoted to it. There was a commitment there, and she was willing to see it through to, like, till death do her part. And so, and so then the last three lines, there's a sudden shift, and she becomes disillusioned very quickly. So we believe that this is her in the present day, which is in the beginning where she was speaking from, because she had talked about 30 years passing and different things like that, which the 10 and the 20 add up to 30. And so this is her in the present day, kind of reinstating that she no longer believes this. There was a switch in her mind. We're not exactly sure what it was, but something happened that she completely shut off all communication with the ideology, and she just is done.
If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you, and drank my blood for a year. 7 years if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now. So if I've killed one man, I've killed two. We are saying that if they killed someone because of Nazism, that they cannot live with themselves and that they internally killed themselves. And it goes back to the previous stanza when they said that they tried to die. And then the vampire who said he was you, we thought that that vampire who was going after them was Nazism and drank my blood for a year, 7 years. So, like, harmed them for 7 years, and so many bad things are happening. We thought the 7 years could be the 7 deadly sins. And then it says, Daddy, you can lie back now. So they're like, bye, like, I'm done with you. And then the next stanza, there's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through. So a stake is how you kill a vampire, so it goes back to the vampire reference, and it's like the most aggressive way. It's literally stabbing it and killing it. And then your fat black heart, so the black heart is just unhappy, so his heart is fat, and it's full of so many bad things, and it was so wide, bad things are so widespread, and it was full of so many bad things that they were black and they were bad, so it was dark. And the villagers never liked you, so the villagers never liked him. They just said that they just went along with whatever he did. And they're dancing and stamping on you, so now they see what they did wrong. They always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through. So they're officially done with it. The narrator is officially done with Nazism and done with everything that has to do with it. And this is their way of saying goodbye.
So for the soapstone of this poem, we began with the speaker, which is the narrator is, we believe, the author, as a child, a teen, and now. So she's growing up. It's kind of her life story. And it's also someone who is in a town that was taken over by Germany during World War II, kind of an outsider, but from the outside world seen as part of the Nazi German territory. And then the occasion is a confession or a rant about all the bad things she did when she believed in Nazism, but the rant about being over it and how it was manipulating her and it took her for advantage and things like that. The audience, we believe, is Daddy, or Nazism, which is also the title of the story or title of the poem. The purpose is a catharsis for what she had done, kind of to get her feelings out. Once again, confession is a way of her to cope with all the horrible things she did and thought and believed. The subject is Nazism and World War II. It begins talking about how America killed the daddy first before she could, and that speaks to the World War II part, whereas the rest of the story is pretty much about Nazism. And then the tone, we said, was vitriolic, sinister, apathetic at the end. So she's very angry, and she in the whole beginning, there's some vivid imagery in what Germany did, how she felt like an outsider, cast aside. But then when she started buying into it and believed into it full-heartedly, she began to do the things that Nazis did. And she just seems very angry and evil. But then at the end, she's over it because she's done with Daddy officially, and she becomes apathetic and does not really care.